Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into a time when being a woman with desire was a little like being born with a ticking time bomb, except it was shaped like a fig and everyone pretended it didn't exist. The air smells of smoke, animal fat, and sweat. You're wrapped in rough wool, your body stiff from sleep on straw-stuffed bedding, and the first thing you feel, besides the chill, is shame. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because you're a girl, and that means suspicion clings to you like fleas to a dog. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your city and local time in the comments. Let's see who else is awake right now, thinking about history in their pajamas. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born into a world where Eve's little apple snack is still echoing through the fields and churches. It doesn't matter if you're in a peasant's cottage or a noble's stone manor. You come into this world already tethered to the original sin hotline. Your body is a problem to be managed. Desire? That's not just frowned upon. It's considered dangerous, contagious, and probably the reason crops failed last year. From your first steps, people are already watching how you move. Did your skirt lift too high? Did your eyes linger too long on the shepherd boy? And let's be honest, he's got forearms like he's been wrangling dragons, but even noticing that makes you fallen. Historians still argue whether the church's views were universally enforced or mostly aspirational, meaning there were plenty of sinners pretending to be saints. But you don't get that luxury. You're female, which means even if you don't sin, your body suggests you might. There's this Latin phrase you hear in sermons, mulier est homini confusio. Some think it means woman is man's confusion, though others say it's just bad medieval Latin for a really bad joke. Either way, it fits, because no one can quite decide what you are. A temptress, a child of God, a ticking lust trap, maybe all three, depending on the priest's mood. Even before you understand what desire is, you learn that it belongs to others. Boys are taught to conquer it. Girls are taught to deny it, and then are blamed for causing it anyway. Double standard? Oh, absolutely. But it's wrapped in holy parchment and sealed with a bishop's ring. As you grow, the rules tighten. By age 12, yes, 12, you're considered marriageable. Your hips are checked like livestock, and aunties whisper about blood signs and dowries, as if puberty is a public service announcement. You're still figuring out how to braid your hair, and suddenly you're supposed to guard your virtue like it's gold in a dragon's cave. Mainstream texts like De Secretis Mulierum, The Secrets of Women, a medieval medical guide, describe female desire as a wild force needing containment. According to some authors, if you don't release that desire through lawful union, code for boring sex with your husband, it'll overheat your body and cause all sorts of disorders. Hysteria, wandering womb syndrome, spontaneous combustion. Okay, maybe not that last one, but it wouldn't have surprised anyone. Here's the thing. Even if you try to be a good girl, say your prayers, avoid mirrors, keep your ankles hidden, people still talk. A laugh that's too loud? You're lusty. A gaze that lingers? You're plotting sin. A dream where you wake up breathless? Well, best you go tell Father Bernard and get ready to spend the next 2 weeks on bread and tears. There's a bizarre fringe belief, popular in some corners of medieval Europe, that women who experience pleasure outside marriage are likely to grow a devil's nipple somewhere hidden on their body. Witch hunters will later check for it, usually with a dagger or a rusty hook. You're welcome for that mental image, and yet the longing remains. It curls in your gut during harvest dances and flickers in your belly when you watch a night train in the yard. You don't even have the words for it. You just feel, and that alone is dangerous. There's a story passed around the village about a girl named Marietta who smiled too much at a traveling bard. One day she's picking apples, the next she's gone. Some say she ran away. Others say she was taken by the devil. The wise women just shake their heads and tell their daughters to lower their voices. But there's something almost rebellious in the way you breathe. You're still here. You're still feeling. And no one, not the church, not your parents, not the whispering aunties, can fully shut that down. You lie awake some nights, thinking of the river and how it rushes past the mossy stones, wild and unapologetic. That's how you wish your soul felt. Free-flowing, untamed. But instead, you wrap yourself in wool, whisper a prayer you don't quite believe, and fall asleep wondering if desiring joy means damning your soul. You wake up to the clang of the church bell and the distant bleating of goats, but what really stirs you is the creeping pressure of choice, or the lack thereof. You're getting older now, which means your path is narrowing faster than the alley behind the butcher's stall. If you're lucky, or unlucky, depending on the angle, you'll land in one of three boxes: nuns, wives, or witches. Let's start with the holy route, the convent. Cold stone walls, hard bread, and silence so thick you could slice it with a relic. You wear plain linen, keep your eyes lowered, and spend most of your time pretending not to think about things that no one will let you name. For a while, it feels safe, predictable, structured. But even inside the cloister, your body betrays you. You still dream, you still feel. And sometimes, even behind sacred walls, women whisper secrets in Latin and touch fingertips just a little too long during evening prayers. Historians still argue whether convents were havens of female autonomy or cleverly disguised prisons for inconvenient daughters. The truth? Probably both. Some nuns genuinely found spiritual peace. Others were shoved behind abbey gates because their dowries were too small or their questions too big. You could pray all day and still not silence that low pulse in your stomach every time Sister Agnes reads from the Song of Songs. It's supposed to be an allegory for divine love, but honestly, it sounds suspiciously like someone's been kissing necks in the vineyard. Then there's marriage. You already know what that means. A man, likely older, possibly hairy, will be assigned to you like a mule. Your job: produce heirs, keep the fire lit, and never ever complain. You become a wife, a vessel, a household manager. Love? Optional. Pleasure? Unspoken. If your husband is kind, you might be spared the worst of it. If he's cruel, you endure it in silence. Either way, your body becomes less yours and more of a shared resource, like the village well. There's a popular idea in the medieval world that women enjoy sex too much. One 13th century text even claims that women need 12 acts of love for every one a man requires. This wasn't a compliment, it was a warning. A woman who likes it too much, dangerous, disorderly, in need of discipline. So while your husband may roll over satisfied, you're left staring at the timber beams above your bed, counting splinters. Now, let's say you don't fit the nun mold, and maybe marriage isn't in the cards, whether by choice or by fate. Then society begins to squint at you. Widow? Spinster? Midwife? Herbalist? Or the catch-all category no one wants to say out loud. Witch. The thing about witches is, you rarely call yourself one. That label shows up uninvited, often right after you've done something useful, like curing a fever, helping with a difficult birth, or daring to speak when a man thinks you should stay quiet. Suddenly, your talent is suspicious. Your cat, a familiar. Your tea blend, a potion. Your dreams, evidence. You become the story parents whisper to their children at night. Behave, or you'll end up like Aldith, alone in the woods, talking to birds. And you know what? Sometimes Aldith looks like she's doing just fine. Fresh herbs, her own fire, no one grabbing at her apron. But you also know the cost. One wrong word, one sick cow, and Aldith could be dragged to the square and forced to confess things she never did, under pressure you can't even imagine. In reality, many of the women accused of witchcraft were older, single, and simply inconvenient. They existed on the fringes, not because they were evil, but because they didn't fit into the tidy boxes. Some were healers, some were just unlucky. One historical record notes a woman in 15th century Switzerland who was tried for witchcraft after baking bread too light for her age. Honestly, that's either magic or a very good sourdough starter. Here's the joke no one tells out loud. Society feared women who desired too little, too much, or just differently. If you shut it all down and devoted yourself to God, you were suspect. If you embraced passion within marriage, you were acceptable but watched. And if you dared to seek joy outside those borders, you were a threat, a puzzle, an excuse for someone else's sermon. The roles are tight, the scripts are brittle, and you feel it every time you laugh too hard, stretch too freely, or feel that electric hum in your spine when someone brushes your sleeve at market. You keep your mouth shut. You keep your head down. You wonder if the local priest knows what it's like to want something so badly your hands shake, and then judge it anyway. You suspect he does. That's what makes his sermons so fierce. But still, in the quiet moments, between the church bells toll and the rooster's cry, you imagine another life. A space where you could want without fear, touch without punishment, exist without label. And even though the world insists you choose a box, you begin to suspect the most dangerous thing you can do is carve out a little corner that doesn't fit into any of them. Steam curls in slow tendrils around your knees, the heat fogging the wooden walls of the women's bathhouse. Here, for a few fleeting moments, you are neither nun, wife, nor witch. You're simply skin and breath, and the sound of water dripping from someone's hair onto the worn planks below. This space, hidden, moist, warm, is one of the rare places where you hear honest talk from other women. About marriage, about pain, about pleasure, even about that thing no one's supposed to name out loud, wanting. You lean against the slick wall, feeling the wood still warm from someone else's body. To your left, two older women gossip like their lives depend on it. Maybe they do. One laughs about her third husband's useless little worm. The other, with graying braids, says she preferred her second. At least he knew what to do with his hands. A younger girl turns pink at the mention, but she listens. So do you. Historians still argue whether bathhouses were safe havens for female community or hotbeds of scandal. The truth lies in the steam. Bathhouses were places where the rules softened just enough for honesty to seep through the cracks. Public, yes, but with sections reserved for women, for modesty, although modesty was often more suggested than enforced. You scrub your arms with a rag dipped in rosemary water. The scent is sharp, earthy, familiar. Someone passes you a lump of rough soap made from ash and goat fat. It smells terrible. It works. The bathwater is cloudy with lavender and secrets. This isn't just hygiene. This is ritual, release. And beneath the gossip, there's a darker thread. Warnings about girls who got curious and found themselves with child, or worse, branded unchaste and sent off to some relative's farm until the scandal dies down. But you notice the glances, lingering, curious. A brush of fingers passing a cloth, the warmth of another woman's thigh too close beneath the surface. You don't know if it's intentional. Maybe she doesn't either. You just know that you feel something stir, a strange pulse below your ribs that has nothing to do with soap. And here's the catch. The bathhouse is one of the few places where women talk about pleasure, but never in the way men imagine. They speak of moments, of stolen feelings. One woman says she likes it when her husband leaves for hunting trips because her body gets a break. Another says she touches herself in the hayloft and prays for forgiveness afterward. A third talks about a stable girl she kissed once, and the room goes quiet until someone changes the subject to embroidery. There's a fringe theory, ignored by most serious scholars, that bathhouses in certain towns doubled as informal centers of erotic exchange. Not brothels, exactly, but places where women explored the limits of their roles in soft, steamy rebellion. Whether that's true or not, you know this. You've never felt more like yourself than you do surrounded by bare skin and unapologetic laughter. You close your eyes and let the warmth seep into your bones. You think of the tension in your belly when that one shepherd girl helped you lift a bale of hay last week. The way her fingers lingered at your wrist. You tried to forget. You're trying still. One older woman, bent with age and wisdom, tells a story about a nobleman's daughter who was caught enjoying herself in the garden with a maid. They were separated. The maid disappeared. The noble girl was sent to a nunnery, where she later became abbess, famously strict, famously pious. That's what guilt will do, the woman says, rinsing her feet. You wonder what happened to the maid. In another corner of the room, two girls no older than 16 share a boiled egg, giggling. One of them pretends to moan as she bites it. Everyone laughs. It's a bold joke. It makes your stomach lurch, not from disgust, but from envy. To be that free, even for a heartbeat. Suddenly, someone bursts in, a matron in a damp apron, carrying a bucket of hot water. The mood sobers. You're all reminded that this is still a village, not a fantasy. Gossip flies fast, especially when it tastes like scandal. You shrink a little, eyes down, breath steady. But for a moment, the bathhouse felt like something else. Not a rebellion, not quite, but a shimmer of what could be. There's this notion, somewhere between folklore and history, that women who enjoy sex are more likely to be visited by demons in the night. Incubi. They come, supposedly, when the soul is too open. Funny how that logic works. If you feel pleasure, it must be supernatural. If you don't, well, congratulations, you're normal. Either way, it's never just you. As you rinse your hair, fingers massaging your scalp, you can't help but wonder what it would be like to live in a world where desire isn't dangerous, where wanting something, someone, doesn't mark you for ruin. You breathe deep. The water slides down your back, hot and heavy, and you hold on to that thought a few seconds longer than you should. Then you dress, pull the wool close around your shoulders, and step out into the cold. But your skin still remembers the warmth, and your mind, the laughter, and your heart, your dangerous, fluttering heart, holds onto the tiniest spark of defiance. She lives on the edge of the village, just far enough that you have to mean it to visit her. Her door is warped from years of rain, and a bundle of dried herbs sways from the lintel like a quiet warning. You knock, not because you want to, no one ever wants to, but because your belly has been tight for days, and there's a kind of weight in your chest that your prayers haven't cured. She opens the door with hands that look older than the hills, but eyes that miss nothing. The village midwife, the wise woman, the one your mother warns you against and secretly consults once a year. You step inside, and the smell hits first: thyme, smoke, and something sharp and metallic like dried blood and secrets. You don't even have to say what you're here for. She just nods once and waves you toward the stool. Her table is cluttered with jars, dark glass, clay, twisted root bundles, things that move when they shouldn't. And in the center, the thing you came for, a small, lumpy pouch filled with crushed herbs wrapped in waxed linen. Historians still debate how much real contraceptive knowledge women held in the Middle Ages. But the recipes, scrawled on scraps of parchment, whispered across bathhouses and hedgerows, exist. Pennyroyal, rue, Queen Anne's lace, crocodile dung in Egypt, mercury in China. Dangerous? Absolutely. But when the alternative is being cast out, punished, or forced into a life you didn't choose, risk starts to look a lot like freedom. You listen closely as she instructs you. How to steep the mixture, when to drink it, what to avoid. She tells you not to take it too often, or your womb might wander. You nod, even though you're not sure what that means. No one is. The womb, they say, can travel around the body if left unsatisfied. That's what causes hysteria, or melancholy, or nosebleeds, apparently. You ask if it'll work. She shrugs. Better than praying, maybe. You're not sure if it's sarcasm or wisdom. maybe both. She offers you something else, just a whisper of a suggestion, a charm sewn into your bodice, a root under your mattress, a potion that makes men sleepy or compliant. You shake your head, but you take the charm anyway, just in case. You've heard rumors that she once helped a baron's daughter avoid scandal, that she delivered twins in the middle of a thunderstorm with nothing but a spoon and prayer, that she cursed a man's seed so he couldn't father children ever again. You don't know what's true. You just know people visit her in secret and leave looking relieved or lighter or scared. And here's the irony. This woman, this midwife with the hunched back and sharp tongue, might be the most educated person you've ever met. She knows anatomy better than most priests know scripture. She's seen more of life and death than your father and brothers combined. But no one calls her doctor. They call her heretic, hag, healer. If they're feeling generous, you catch sight of something in the corner, a wooden carving of a woman with heavy breasts and wide hips, something ancient, older than the Virgin Mary, older than Christ. The midwife notices you staring. She keeps the women safe, she says, flatly. Then she goes back to measuring out powder with the end of a chicken bone. There's a kind of reverence in the way she works, not religious, but something deeper, sacred in the way moss grows around graves. You realize she's not just giving you herbs, she's giving you control. Maybe not total, but a sliver, and in your world, a sliver is gold. You leave with the pouch tucked into your chemise and 1,000 warnings swirling in your head. Don't let your mother see it. Don't drink it too late in your cycle. Don't talk about the root or the charm or the way the midwife touched your wrist and said, "You deserve to choose." There's a fringe tale, passed around taverns when the ale flows. Women like her used to be worshipped, priestesses, oracles, that they held the power of life and death in their hands before the church took it from them. Most people laugh it off. But as you walk home under the dusk sky, you wonder. Your hands tremble. Not from fear, from possibility. You pass your neighbor, and she eyes you curiously. You smile, too wide, too bright, and keep walking. She doesn't know what's in your pocket, doesn't know that inside your threadbare tunic you carry a scrap of power, bitter and herbal, and absolutely forbidden. You boil the water quietly that night, when the house is asleep. The smell is foul, but you drink it anyway. The bitterness coats your tongue and burns all the way down. You don't pray, not because you've stopped believing, but because this feels more honest than any kneeling ever has. As you curl into bed, you feel something shift inside you, not just physically. A turning, a loosening, like you've done something both sacred and dangerous, and tomorrow you'll act like nothing's changed. But in the privacy of your skin, you know, your body feels off. Not sick exactly, just strange. A heaviness low in your belly, a kind of tautness in your chest, like the air is heavier only for you. You tell yourself it's nothing, just the season changing or the stew you ate too late. But still, that creeping thought slips in. What if the potion didn't work? You wrap your shawl tighter and head to the well. On the way, you pass 3 women. One's pregnant, again. Her back curves like a bowstring, her eyes hollow with sleeplessness. The second whispers something to the third, who looks down at your stomach and then quickly away. You're not showing, obviously, but the imagination of a village fills in blanks before facts ever arrive. There's no winning here. If your belly swells, you're indecent. If it stays flat for too long, they'll wonder if you're barren, or cursed, or unnatural. Women's bodies are always on trial, even without judges. Historians still argue whether medieval communities truly understood conception and pregnancy, or just operated on folklore and guesswork. The answer, of course, is both. Plenty of women knew more than the church ever credited them for. And plenty of men didn't understand the basic timeline of gestation, but still wrote the rules. Take the trial by belly, for example. A woman accused of illicit sex, or worse, sorcery, might be watched for signs of pregnancy. No evidence? She must have bewitched the man. Signs of swelling? Clearly sinful. Either way, she loses. You sit on a wooden stool in the cottage and run a hand over your stomach. Flat. But you don't feel relief. Because it's not just about whether you're with child. It's about what people think you might be. Desire isn't visible, but its consequences are. And they're always yours to carry. Sometimes, even not being pregnant is suspicious. If you're married, they whisper. Why no child yet? Is she cold? Is she broken? Has the devil sealed her womb? There's even a tale about a woman who slept in the barn with the cows so often, her neighbors said she'd been over-cured by nature and was now barren from too much moonlight. That's not a joke. That's just medieval science. You try not to react when a neighbor offers you a piece of barley bread and pats your wrist with meaning. Eat well, dear, for the child you might one day carry. You smile politely and dream of setting the bread on fire. The midwife's warning echoes. Even silence makes noise, if it lasts long enough. You thought she was being poetic. Now, you understand. When you're a woman, even your absence of evidence is evidence, and should something go wrong, say you are with child, and the child doesn't stay, then you're in even murkier waters. Miscarriage. That's grief wrapped in suspicion. Did you provoke it? Use herbs. Did your sinful thoughts drive the life away? After all, they say desire corrupts the womb, makes it inhospitable. Too much heat, and it boils the baby right out. Too much cold, and nothing takes root. You could be condemned by the temperature of your own blood. In some towns, there were actual laws that punished women for losing pregnancies, especially if they weren't married. Because obviously, nature and God can't be wrong. Only the woman. You spend more and more time alone, just to avoid questions. And that's when the dreams start. You're standing in a church, completely still, wearing a dress made of feathers. Everyone's staring. A priest opens his mouth and birds fly out. You don't know what it means. Maybe you don't want to. There's a story the midwife told once, half joking, half sincere, about a woman who carried a child for 13 months. When it was born, it had teeth and the eyes of an old man. The townspeople burned her house down. She survived, barely, and wandered the hills singing lullabies to owls. You laughed at the time. Now it just sounds familiar. You finally let yourself cry one night, not from sadness exactly, but from sheer exhaustion. You are tired of your body being a battlefield, of feeling like a crime scene when all you wanted was to feel something good, something yours, and through the tears, a different thought sneaks in. What if you had enjoyed it, whatever it was? The closeness, the fire in your blood, the small rebellion of wanting something for yourself. Does that make you wicked, or does it just make you awake? There's a fringe record, found in the margins of an old monastic ledger, about a woman who confessed that she had loved the joining more than the result. The monk who wrote it noted, "She wept bitterly and repented, though I do not think her tears were of shame." You imagine her. What she looked like, if she got to keep that memory, even after the punishment. You curl onto your side, hands on your stomach, still flat, still uncertain. But in that moment, you decide not to feel guilt, just for tonight. You decide to let yourself have that fire, even if the world keeps trying to smother it with ash. And in the morning, you will get up and bake the bread, fetch the water, smile at your neighbor. But tonight, you lie in the hush of your room and name your own body not as a problem, but as a place. Your place. A secret country of muscle and nerve, where, just once, you are allowed to feel alive. The chapel is cold, and not in a poetic way. Cold like stone that has never felt sunlight. You kneel on bare wood, knees aching, eyes fixed on the statue of the Virgin. She's perfect, blank-faced, and utterly unattainable. Above her, carved in Latin, the words glow in gold, Mater Purissima. Most pure. You shift your weight, trying not to wince. Around you, other women kneel too. Some older, with lined faces and twisted hands. Others young, eyes downcast, wrapped in layers meant to hide their shape. All of you sitting in front of a man, always a man, telling you what God thinks of your body. Today, the priest's voice booms from the pulpit like thunder in a wine barrel. He's reading from a popular text, the Malleus Maleficarum maybe, or some other blessed torture manual thinly disguised as religious guidance. The female is more carnal than the male, he says, pausing for effect, and more prone to sin by reason of her insatiable carnal appetite. You wonder if he knows he's projecting. You wonder if everyone does. Historians agree that the medieval church was obsessed with sex, not in a sexy way, in the way a wasp is obsessed with sugar, always circling, always defensive, always ready to sting. Manuals were written not just for clergy but for regular folks too, how to confess, how to punish, how to detect the stench of lust before it poisons your soul. You're told that pleasure within marriage is acceptable, but only for procreation. Anything else? Dangerous, deviant, demon bait. And if you seek pleasure without marriage, well, then you're not just sinning, you're collaborating with hell. There's a fringe theory, debated mostly in dusty academic corners, that medieval Europe's fixation on female desire had less to do with religion and more to do with control. That if women truly believed their pleasure was sinful, they'd never rise up to claim it. And if they did, if they reached for it anyway, then the church had its scapegoats and sinners already labeled. You sit there, staring at the statue, and feel something sour climb up your throat. The Virgin's robes flow like liquid marble. Her expression is serene. But you're supposed to look at her and be ashamed, because you have a body that aches, that wants, that bleeds. She, in contrast, is untouched, pure, unreachable, and yet, you wonder, did Mary feel anything when she held her child? When she kissed someone for the first time? Did she get to want, or is her sainthood built on the very fact that she never did? A woman beside you shifts. She's younger than you, lips bitten raw, eyes red. She probably confessed something, maybe even just a dream. And now she's here, like you, being told her body is a trap set by the devil and her soul is dangling by a thread. You think about the sermons on modesty, how they always seem to mention what you must cover, how your hair tempts, how your voice entices, how your hips can ruin kingdoms. Funny, no one ever mentions how easily a man can choose not to look, not to reach, not to hurt. There's a part in the sermon where the priest quotes a medieval bestseller called De Planctu Naturae, The Complaint of Nature. In it, nature complains that lustful women invert the proper order of things, that they mimic men, that they seek power. You almost laugh, because yes, you do seek power. Over your own body, over your choices, over anything, frankly. And that's exactly what they fear. You rise from your knees after the final prayer, legs numb, heart clenched. Your headscarf slips a little, and you quickly fix it. Eyes are always watching. Not just the priests, not just your neighbors. Even the carved saints seem to judge you, their stone eyes following you down the aisle. Outside, the sun hits your face and blinds you for a second. It's too bright, too warm. And for just a moment you feel angry. Not at God, not even at yourself, but at the smallness of this system. The way it coils around you like ivy, choking the light out of anything soft and growing. You walk home slowly, your steps louder than usual on the packed earth. A child runs past you, chasing a chicken. Someone's baking bread, your stomach growls. And in that moment, you wonder if the God they preach is the same one you feel when the wind brushes your cheek, or when someone's laugh makes your ribs ache with joy. Because surely that God wouldn't condemn you for wanting to feel whole, or alive, or loved. Right. But then you remember the penance assigned to that girl last week, 3 days in silence, kneeling on grain. Because she looked too long at her cousin's husband. The world doesn't punish sin. It punishes suspicion. You reach your doorstep and rest your hand against the wood. And though you say nothing, inside your mind, A small rebellion curls its toes and stretches. Not loud, not ready, but growing. You know the sound before you see it. A low, rhythmic cry carried on the wind. Someone is in labor, and in your village, that means only one thing. You go find the midwives. They've already gathered when you arrive. 2 older women and 1 younger, all sleeves rolled, all calm. The laboring woman is sweating through her shift, hands clenched around a folded cloth, eyes wild. You see fear in her gaze, not just from the pain, but from what could happen if this doesn't go well. Birth isn't just a natural event here. It's a gamble, a spiritual test, a moral checkpoint. If the baby is born healthy, it's a blessing. If not, well, maybe someone sinned. Maybe you did. Historians agree that medieval midwives walked a dangerous line. On one hand, they were essential. Most villages didn't have access to physicians. On the other, they were always one stillbirth away from suspicion. It only took one wrong cry, one cord tangled the wrong way, and the same hands that brought life could be accused of dealing death. You kneel beside the youngest midwife, a girl barely older than you. She hands you a cloth, gestures for water. You obey. Not because she says so, but because in this moment she is the authority, not the priest, not the husband pacing outside the door, not even the woman screaming in the bed. The air smells of sweat, blood, and rosewater. The older midwife mutters something in a language you don't recognize. Maybe Latin, maybe older. A chant passed down through generations, not written in any book. Something to keep the womb open, the soul grounded. You glance at the herbal bundle burning in the corner. It's mugwort, you think. Or maybe wormwood. There's a fringe belief that certain herbs can calm the womb or charm the infant into the world. Whether that's true or just comfort wrapped in smoke, it feels real. And then, finally, the baby comes. It's loud and slippery and utterly human. A girl. The mother cries. So does the child. And for a moment, the room is filled not with fear or shame, but life. Raw, chaotic, miraculous. But the relief is short. One of the midwives lifts the newborn and begins the check. Eyes, limbs, cries, color. If anything looks off, too quiet, too blue, too malformed, it becomes a question of why. Not medically, spiritually, morally. You think of that woman last spring. Her baby was born silent and stayed that way. No one blamed the storm, or the hunger that winter. They blamed her, said she must have harbored lustful thoughts during pregnancy, said her womb knew she was impure. And when you whispered that maybe babies sometimes just don't make it, your mother slapped your cheek. Hard. The baby today is fine, red-faced and furious, already judging the world, as all babies should. But you still feel that flicker of fear. Because someday, someone might not be so lucky, and you might be the one holding the cloth when the breath doesn't come. You help clean the room, burn the linens, wash your hands in cold water that smells of iron. And you ask yourself a question you've asked before. Why is it that the people who know the most about women's bodies are the ones most distrusted? There's an old superstition you remember. If a midwife saves too many women, she must be bargaining with the devil. If she saves too few, she's incompetent. You'd laugh if it weren't so close to the truth. Outside, the husband finally gets to see his child. His relief is loud, messy, tearful. You watch him kiss his wife's forehead and think, he'll be praised for this child's birth for years. Her body did all the work, but he'll be the one remembered for giving her a daughter. And the midwives? They'll be lucky if anyone remembers their names. You walk home past the chapel, where candles flicker behind the stained glass. You think about how the church fears blood only when it comes from you. The blood of war is noble. The blood of martyrs is holy. But the blood of childbirth, messy, shameful, secret. You remember the way the older midwife looked at the baby, not with sentiment, but with responsibility, as if she was measuring the future in that child's face. Girls born in this world are born into danger from their very first breath. And yet, you also remember the strength in that room. The coordination, the knowledge, the way 3 women brought forth life with no help, no blessing, no permission. Just hands and wisdom and grit. You lie in bed that night thinking about the chant the midwife whispered. You don't know the words, but you hum the rhythm. It lodges somewhere beneath your ribs, warm and stubborn, and for the first time in a long time, you don't dream of being punished. You dream of firelight, and women's voices, and the strength it takes to hold life in your hands and let it go. There's a woman in your village everyone talks about, but never to. You know her name, but you're not supposed to say it. She lives near the inn, wears colors that are just a little too bright, and walks like she doesn't care who's watching. You do watch, though. So does everyone else. They call her names harlot, temptress, whore. But when she passes, even the most God-fearing men suddenly forget their prayers, and some of the women watch too, their gazes unreadable, curious, threatened, intrigued. She is everything you've been told not to be, and yet somehow, everything you secretly wonder if you could survive being. You've never spoken to her. But you know her story, or at least the version passed around over ale and piety. Once a baker's daughter, or maybe a nobleman's discarded mistress, or maybe, if the more dramatic villagers are to be believed, a cursed nun. Either way, she lives alone, she dresses well, and she makes no apologies. Historians acknowledge the blurry line between respectable woman and fallen woman in medieval towns. A reputation could flip on a single whisper, a flirtatious glance, a pregnancy without a wedding, or just being too visible in the wrong place at the wrong time. And yet, those same women were often quietly essential to the social fabric, caregivers, lovers, even confidants to the same men who condemned them. You remember the day she caught you staring. She didn't look angry, just knowing. Like she could see right through your wool shift and your wide eyes. Like she knew exactly what kind of questions lived in your chest at night. And here's the thing, the village needs someone like her, someone to bear the weight of everyone else's unspoken thoughts. She is the scapegoat, the cautionary tale, the fire everyone gathers around to warm their hands, just close enough to feel the heat, but not so close as to get burned. She buys bread like everyone else, pays with silver, never begs, never bows. That alone unsettles people, because a woman who enjoys herself and pays her own way is a contradiction the town can't digest. There's a fringe account you once heard from the old washerwoman, about a traveling knight who left a pouch of gold at the inn, and when it went missing, everyone blamed the loose woman. Except she returned it the next morning, untouched. Said she found it outside in the mud. No one thanked her. They just glared harder. You wonder what it must be like to live every day knowing your name is spoken more than the priest's, and far less kindly. One afternoon, by accident or fate, you find yourself near her home. She's sitting in the doorway, cleaning a pair of boots that probably belong to someone important. Her sleeves are rolled. Her face, lined with sun and defiance. You hesitate. She notices. She always notices. You look like you've got a question, she says, not looking up. Her voice is low, flat, not unkind. You almost deny it, but something inside you says, why not ask? Do they ever leave you alone, you say. She laughs. Once, sharp. Never, but they never really come close either. She finishes scrubbing and sets the boots aside. They need someone like me. Gives them something to feel better than. That way they don't have to ask hard things about their own wives, or themselves. You nod, unsure if you're allowed to. She glances up. They're scared, she says, because I enjoy myself and nothing bad's happened. Not yet. That sentence echoes in your head the whole walk home. She's right, you realize. If you were truly cursed, people wouldn't envy you. They'd pity you. But no one pities her. They resent her freedom. The way she stands in her doorway like she owns her life. You think of all the women who've lived by the rules and still suffered. the wife whose husband drinks and snarls, the widow who lost 3 children and still sits in the front pew every Sunday, the girl who married young and weeps quietly in the barn, thinking no one hears. The loose woman has no husband, no master, no church pew, but she has herself. And that is somehow the biggest threat of all. You lie awake that night, thinking about what it would mean to stop apologizing for who you are. To walk like her, back straight, eyes forward. To enjoy something and not drown in guilt after. It seems impossible, but it also seems inevitable. Because once the question is planted, it grows. Why not me? Why not joy? And though you pull the blankets tight and whisper your nightly prayers, your heart isn't asking for forgiveness. It's asking for courage. The music floats through the stone hall, soft as candlelight. Lutes, flutes, and low voices hum in harmony, while noblemen and their powdered wives sip wine that tastes of violets and vinegar. You're not a guest, you're a servant tonight, or a cousin visiting from the countryside, or maybe you've just slipped in behind the tapestries because curiosity outweighs fear. Either way, you're here, watching. Across the room, a young knight kneels before a lady whose hair falls in impossibly smooth coils, pinned with a brooch shaped like a hawk. He holds her hand, not her whole hand, just the tips of her fingers, and sings to her. Literally sings. His voice quivers with longing so theatrical you almost giggle. This is courtly love. Ritualized yearning. Desire with armor and rhyming couplets. Historians still argue whether any of this was ever real. Some say it was literary fantasy, an emotional release valve for bored nobles. Others insist that it shaped medieval relationships in profound, sometimes dangerous ways. What's certain is that courtly love was never meant to end in consummation. Wanting was the whole point. Having ruined everything, you watch the lady smile, just barely. A curl of her lip, a flick of her eyes. It's subtle, calculated, because if she responds too eagerly, she's a harlot. Too cold, and she's frigid. So she walks that invisible wire, flirting just enough to stir him and the crowd, but not enough to fall. You step closer to the marble column, heart tapping. This isn't like your village. Here, love is performance. And strangely, that makes it safe. Women like her are allowed to enjoy attention as long as it stays in metaphor. Her knight will write sonnets. She'll wear his colors at a tournament. But if they ever kiss, that's scandal. That's exile. And yet, it happens. You hear the whispers. Behind the formality, behind the gallant games, desire smolders. Servants get caught in stables. Ladies sneak out with chambermaids. Pages leave letters hidden in the folds of cloaks. They think no one knows. Everyone knows. There's a fringe tale about a duchess in Aquitaine who gave each of her lovers a lock of her hair until her chamber caught fire and the burned strands revealed her secret lovers by scent alone, probably apocryphal, but unforgettable. You wonder what it would feel like to be wanted in verse, to have someone call your eyes stars, your laughter music. It sounds ridiculous and appealing. But courtly love has rules, and the biggest one is this: real pleasure belongs elsewhere. In the dark, in silence, in secret. You see it in the servant's wing. A kitchen girl sneaks a crust to the stable boy, and their fingers brush too long. A lady's maid smooths her mistress's bodice with just a hint of tenderness. No one says a word. But the air knows, because even in the castles, women who enjoy anything too much are dangerous. Their husbands might be away at war, or sick with gout, or dull as boiled cabbage. Doesn't matter. A woman's longing is meant to be decorative, not demanding. You walk through the garden later, the music fading behind you. Moonlight catches the dew on roses. Somewhere in the hedges, someone's giggling. You don't look. You just walk, feeling the crush of gravel beneath your shoes, feeling that same ache inside that doesn't go away just because you changed your dress. And it hits you. Here, even when women do enjoy themselves, they're still only allowed to do it through someone else's script. The knight sings. The lady blushes. The poem gets passed around. But behind closed doors, no one asks if she finished the verse, so to speak. You remember a line from one of the troubadour songs, recited in the hall earlier. Her glance wounds deeper than any blade. Everyone clapped. You rolled your eyes. If a woman's glance is that powerful, imagine what they'd say if they knew how it felt when her fingertips curled, or when her breath caught in her throat. But no. That part is invisible, forbidden, carefully scrubbed from the record. And yet, the longing doesn't go away. You lie in bed that night, not in your village, not quite in the castle either, somewhere in between. You think of the night's trembling voice, the lady's practiced smile, the way everyone pretends desire is artful and tragic, but never physical, never joyful. You think, maybe the reason they keep it all in metaphor is because if they didn't, the truth would be too hard to hold, that women feel. Deeply, fiercely. That women want, not just to be adored, but to adore, to act, to move, to choose. You fall asleep wondering what it would be like to write your own poem. No knight, no bard, just you, your ink, your hand, your story. You sit in the back of the chapel again, but tonight there are no sermons. Just candlelight flickering off cold stone and the quiet creak of wooden benches as women file in, one by one. Their steps are slow, solemn, reverent. No men, no choir. Just the soft shuffle of feet and the sound of breath held a little too long. Tonight, the priest isn't leading. A woman is. She wears a plain habit, eyes cast low, face gaunt in the firelight. She's not from your village. You've heard whispers, a holy woman, a saint, some say. Others say she's been punished more than she's been praised. Either way, you're here to see her. She begins speaking, not from a pulpit, but from the floor. Her voice is quiet, cracked, but every word sticks. She tells the story of Saint Agnes, how she refused to marry, chose Christ over any man, and was dragged naked through the streets as punishment. Miraculously, her hair grew long enough to cover her body. Modesty by miracle. You shiver, not from the cold, but from the weight of it. The idea that the holiest women were the ones who rejected pleasure so fiercely, they practically evaporated from the waist down. Historians still debate how much of these stories are metaphor and how much is cautionary fiction. But the result is clear. Saintliness and sexlessness go hand in hand. You want to be holy? You'd better lock up your womb and toss the key into the nearest relic box. She continues. Saint Margaret, swallowed by a dragon, bursts out of its stomach untouched, symbol of purity surviving the beast of desire. Saint Cecilia, who sang hymns even while being suffocated. Saint Catherine, who refused emperors and got a spiked wheel for her trouble. You wonder if they ever wanted anything. A hand held, a kiss behind a column. A night without fear. The woman pauses. Her eyes sweep the room, and she says softly, "There is power in denial, but there is also pain." No one breathes. And then she tells her story. Quietly, simply. She was once promised to a man, but her body rebelled. She couldn't do it. So she ran. Joined a cloister. Starved herself until the hunger replaced the heat in her skin. It worked, she says. I felt nothing. For years. But one night, she says, she dreamed of a river, of floating, of warm hands on her face. When she woke, she wept not from shame, but from absence. And that's when she realized denial is not the same as peace. You don't know if she's allowed to say that. You don't know if she'll be allowed to say it again. But no one stops her. There's a fringe tradition, kept alive in certain cloisters, where nuns would marry Christ in symbolic ceremonies, complete with rings, veils, and vows. Spiritual marriage, eternal devotion. Some called it beautiful. Others said it was just another way to channel desire into something less scandalous. You think about those vows, about how often women are praised for saying no, for resisting, for enduring, as if that's the only acceptable script. Pleasure, that's for whores. Martyrdom, That's for saints. The woman kneels, and the room stays silent for a long time. You feel something move in your chest, not quite grief, not quite anger, a mourning maybe, for all the women who believed they had to erase themselves to be loved by God. You remember the girl from your village, Mari, with the laugh like birdsong, who joined a convent after her brother caught her with the neighbor's daughter. No one asked if it was love. No one asked if she was hurt. They just gave her a veil and said, "You'll be safe now." Safe. From whom? You leave the chapel slowly, steps echoing in the dark. The air outside is thick with mist. You pull your shawl tighter and walk home in silence, the saint stories swirling in your mind like smoke. You lie in bed and try to pray, but the words feel brittle tonight. So instead, you whisper a name, not a saint's, just a girl you once kissed in a hayloft. Nothing happened, nothing that anyone could see, but you remember the warmth, the softness, the breathless hush, and you wonder, if denying joy makes you holy, what does remembering it make you? You kneel in the confessional, knees aching, palms sweaty, heart pounding a little too fast. On the other side of the wooden screen, a man clears his throat, the priest, cloaked in the scent of incense and boiled linen. You know him. Everyone does. He's preached about fire and brimstone, about the weak will of women and the dangers of unchaste thoughts, and now you're supposed to tell him yours. You hesitate. The wood between you feels thinner than it should, like your words will leak through the cracks, travel through the air, and circle back to bite you. Still, you speak, carefully, not everything, just enough. I've thought about things I shouldn't. There's silence. Then, what things? That's the trick, isn't it? He's supposed to guide you away from sin, but he wants details. Not out of curiosity. No, never that, at least not openly. It's spiritual medicine. Diagnosis requires description. That's the rule. You fumble for words, vague and breathy. A touch, a dream, something that felt nice. You don't say pleasure. Too dangerous. Too sharp. He asks if you acted on it. You say no. It's half true, or mostly true. What you don't say is that the memory of it kept you warm during long winter nights, that you revisit it sometimes when you're alone and the house is quiet. Historians note that the confessional became more structured during the later medieval period, especially as manuals for priests circulated more widely. These books detailed every sin imaginable, often with far more enthusiasm than you'd expect from men supposedly committed to purity. Some entries even read like dark fan fiction. If a woman lies with a man and thinks of another, or if she derives enjoyment from impure dreams, you wonder who came up with those lines. You also wonder what they were trying to suppress. The priest tells you to fast for a week. Bread, water, silence, and extra prayer. Always extra prayer. He blesses you, and you feel neither better nor worse, just watched. You rise from the kneeler and exit into the fading daylight. Your legs feel unsteady. Not from guilt, from exposure. You've just handed over a piece of yourself to a man who's never borne what you carry, who speaks of sin like it's a coat you can shrug off, not a skin you were born into. There's a fringe belief among some women that confession doesn't cleanse. It stains. That once you've said it aloud, it follows you. Not because God remembers, but because he does. The priest, the man behind the screen, his ears are human, and so is his memory. You pass the well on your way home, hear the women talking. One says she confessed unclean desires and was told to sleep with a stone under her pillow. Another says she fasted until she fainted. A third laughs and says, "I confess nothing. I just keep my mouth shut and my eyes down." You wonder if that's the holiest path of all, saying nothing. But you can't help thinking about that moment in the confessional when the priest paused. "Just before giving you your penance," he said, almost too gently. "God understands what the body craves, but the soul must choose better." And for a flicker of a second, It sounded like he knew exactly what you meant, that he'd felt it too. You lie in bed that night, pillow thin beneath your head, stomach growling slightly from your now bare-fast diet. You try to pray again. You try to ask for forgiveness. But something inside you pushes back. What if feeling wasn't the crime? What if the real sin is pretending you don't? There's a tale you once heard from the traveling washerwoman about a woman who confessed her passions to a young priest, only for him to fall in love with her. They both vanished. Some say they were struck down by God. Others say they lived in the mountains, raised goats, and wrote each other psalms. You like that version better. You shift under your blanket and breathe slowly. You remember the midwife's hands, the bathhouse laughter, the scarlet silk the harlot wore like armor. You remember the way the saint's voice cracked when she talked about absence, and you wonder if the next time you kneel to speak, it won't be to confess desire, but to own it, not because you are unclean, but because you are unclean, but because you are alive. You wake up hungry, not just for food, though fasting has gnawed at your belly like mice in a grain sack. It's a deeper hunger now, one you can't starve away with bread or banish with prayer. A hunger for warmth, for softness, for freedom. And yet, today begins with penance. You slip from bed before the sun rises. Your feet are bare against the packed dirt floor. Outside, the sky is the color of old parchment, the village still sleep-muted. You tie your shawl tightly, not for modesty, though that's always the excuse, but to steel yourself for what's coming. Penance in your world isn't quiet reflection. It's performance, proof, a kind of theater designed to reassure others that you've been sufficiently humbled. You, the woman who dreamed of joy, must now wear your shame like a second skin. The priest gave you your tasks: fast, pray, and walk barefoot to the chapel every morning at dawn for 7 days. For your impure mind. But Sister Breda, who's a bit older and not nearly as gentle, adds her own ideas. Sit in the cold spring, she says. Let the water purify your thoughts. You do it, because not doing it means people will talk more. Historians note that medieval penitentials, handbooks for confessors, included a dazzlingly creative list of punishments. For lustful thoughts, cold baths, isolation, silence, flogging, ashes in your food. For actual acts of pleasure, triple it. The belief was clear. To cleanse the body, it must be denied everything it wants. You walk slowly to the chapel, the gravel biting into your soles. A dog watches you from a porch, tail thudding once against the wood. Your fingers are already numb, and the sky spits a faint drizzle. It doesn't feel holy, it just feels cold. Inside the chapel, you kneel, again, and whisper prayers until your lips crack. The only sound is your own voice and the rustle of your breath in the silence. You wonder how many women before you sat like this, praying not for salvation, but for understanding. Afterwards, the cold spring. You strip behind a hedge, trembling, then lower yourself into the water. It steals your breath. You bite your lip to keep from crying out. It doesn't make you feel clean. It makes you feel erased. There's a fringe tradition, you recall, where women who were accused of desiring too much would be made to walk through town with soot on their faces and twigs tied into their hair, symbols of their wildness. The irony, of course, is that the more broken you appeared, the more acceptable you became. Later that day, you help in the kitchen. The other women don't speak to you much. They know you're doing penance, and that makes you both visible and invisible. They glance, but they don't ask. You peel turnips, hands aching from cold, and listen to the rhythm of silence. At night, your stomach growls again. You chew stale bread slowly, like it's a gift. You think about pleasure, how they say it weakens the soul. But you remember how strong you felt when your body was your own, when you moved without shame, when you laughed without checking who was watching. You think of your friend Elsbeth, who once confessed that she touched herself in the woods and then smeared nettle oil on her palms afterward to punish the sin. You asked if it worked. She shrugged. No, But it made me feel like I did something. The next morning, a new punishment, silence. No speaking for a day, not a word. The priest says it's to quiet the noisy parts of the soul. You suspect it's just a way to make you small. You go through your tasks, washing, sweeping, sewing, mute. People speak around you. Some whisper, some don't notice, but you notice everything. And by the end of the day, something shifts. Not in them. In you. You realize that you've been performing remorse for something you're not even sure was wrong. You felt something. Something good. Something good. Something good. Something warm. And they made you punish yourself for it. But here's the twist. The punishment didn't take it away. If anything, it etched it deeper. You remember every second of that dream. Every tingle of that touch. Every breath you weren't supposed to enjoy. You go to bed sore, scraped, and silenced. But your mind isn't blank, it's roaring. You start to wonder, what if they're wrong? What if the feeling itself isn't the danger? What if the shame is? And just before sleep takes you, you think, they can make me walk barefoot. They can take my food and my voice. But they cannot take the memory. And that, somehow, feels like survival. You hear the whispers before the knock. It starts as a trickle. Someone saw strange footprints near the fields. Someone else noticed you talking to the midwife again. And didn't you refuse a man's offer last month? Then there's the chicken that stopped laying, the child with a fever, the dog that howled at nothing. You feel it coming before it comes. The way birds go silent before a storm. The knock is slow, heavy. You open the door to find two men, one in a brown robe with a leather satchel of papers, the other in chainmail, hand resting too casually on the hilt of his sword. You don't cry. You don't argue. You wrap your shawl tightly and walk. Because you've heard the stories. Historians still debate how widespread the Inquisition was in rural communities. Officially, it was meant to root out heresy, not lust. But in practice, anything outside the expected could be rebranded as suspicious, especially when it came from a woman. Especially if that woman had ever said no, or laughed too loudly, or, God forbid, wanted. You're not chained. Not yet. But you're taken to a stone room near the monastery. No windows. Just one door. A chair. A desk. And three men waiting, eyes polished like coins. They ask if you've consorted with the devil. You want to laugh. Instead, you say no. They ask if you've been touched by unnatural thoughts. That word again, unnatural. As if anything you feel could be anything other than what you are. They mention the midwife, the bathhouse, your hesitation to marry, your lack of children. A villager claims they saw you talking to a black cat during the new moon. You remember the cat. It had a limp. You gave it fish bones. They write it down like it's evidence. There's a fringe belief, one even the inquisitors whisper about, that women who lie with demons gain certain abilities. Seduction, flight, knowledge of herbs. You wonder if that's why they fear you, because you dared to want something without them. They ask about dreams. Whether you've flown, whether you've been visited by shadowy men at night. You say no. Not because it's true, but because you know they want it to be. A confession gives them power. Even a lie can become your noose. They ask again. 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 Eventually, they offer kindness. A softer tone. A cup of water. Just tell us you were confused, they say. Just admit you were tempted. You realize they don't want truth. They want confirmation. And somewhere inside, a door slams shut. Because now it doesn't matter whether you've sinned. It only matters that you've been noticed, that you existed too vividly, that someone, maybe the baker's wife, maybe the priest's assistant, thought you burned too brightly for safety. They let you sleep, eventually. On straw, in silence, and in the dark you hear sobbing from another cell, a girl's voice. Younger than you don't know her name. The next morning, they bring you bread and ask again. You say nothing. They bring up other women. One who confessed and was released. Another who didn't and was found drowned. You know the pattern now. They soften you. Then press. then soften again. You wonder if they do this with men, but you already know the answer. In some parts of Europe, women made up 80% of those accused of witchcraft. Most were older, single, poor, or simply inconvenient. But some were young, curious, defiant, like you. They ask if you believe your desires came from Satan. You almost laugh again, but your throat's too dry. So you just stare. The priest leans in, eyes narrowing. Do you think your body belongs to you? And that, more than any accusation, is the real question. Because if you say yes, you're a heretic. If you say no, you're a vessel, and you're tired of being either. So you wait. You tell them only what keeps you alive. You confess to nothing. You don't cry. Eventually, they let you go. No trial, no fire. Not this time. But they mark you. You return home and people avoid your eyes. The midwife pretends not to see you. Children stare, then run. A basket of rotting apples appears on your doorstep the next morning. No note, no mystery. You are free, but not safe. You walk to the river. The same one from your dreams, the same one from that story the saint told. You watch the current, fast and uncaring, and you wonder, how many women have stood right here, asking if joy is worth the cost? And you answer, quietly, in your own voice, yes. You don't expect to find the stories. Not here, not now, not in a bundle of worn pages buried beneath a splintered floorboard in the midwife's house after she falls ill and someone sends you to help clean. But there they are, tucked between dried bay leaves and a ribbon once red, now faded to brown. You pull the pages out carefully. They're written in a slanted, cramped hand. Not Latin, not church-approved script. It's older, or local, or coded. You squint until the meaning emerges. She danced under the moon and fed no man. She sang her own name and no one struck her for it. She said yes because she wanted to, not because she had to. These aren't prayers, they're records. Lives, traces, snapshots of women who somehow got away with it, whatever it was. Loving, laughing, surviving. You read of a woman who lived alone in the hills, who never married, never confessed, and grew roses in soil so poor even weeds refused it. Another who was a healer in a coastal town, who made a man sterile at his wife's request and then vanished before the bishop could find her. A third, this one boldest of all, who lived openly with another woman in a cottage full of cats and carved her initials into the church pew just to prove she had sat there, no matter what they said. Historians call these women anomalies, outliers, marginal cases. But reading these pages, they don't feel like margins. They feel like a pulse. Hidden beneath the noise of sermons and scandal, a heartbeat that's never stopped. You keep reading. One woman, no name given, was a courtesan in Florence. She owned her own home, dressed in silks, and charged high prices not just for her body, but for her company. Men begged for her attention. She took lovers only when she wanted to. One of them left her a vineyard. She sold it and bought a second house. No one ever married her. She didn't want that kind of contract. There's a fringe theory among modern scholars that such women weren't just tolerated, they were essential. That societies quietly relied on women who lived outside the rules to absorb what couldn't be spoken aloud, to embody freedom for those who didn't dare touch it. You wonder how many girls grew up hearing about them in secret as cautionary tales or whispered inspirations. Don't be like her, mothers would say. But sometimes they said it softly. You copy one of the lines from the hidden pages onto a scrap of your own. She wanted, and still she lived. You fold it into the hem of your shift, a charm, a reminder. And now, with your eyes open to these hidden histories, you begin to see things. At market, the older widow who doesn't flinch when a man brushes too close, the nun who sings a little too sweetly during Vespers, the merchant's wife who slips coins into a poor girl's pocket when no one's looking. Small rebellions, quiet defiance. You catch yourself smiling. For the first time, not out of fear, but recognition. There's a tale in the papers about a queen, never named, always whispered, who took lovers in secret, and who, when asked by her confessor why she sinned so boldly, simply said, "Because God made me capable of joy." You repeat it to yourself as you knead bread one morning. The dough is warm beneath your palms, and for once, you feel strong instead of hidden. You start to tell other women. Carefully, quietly. Not the names, not the secrets. Just the fact that there were others. That wanting didn't always end in fire. One night, sitting with the girl who helps in the fields, you say, "Did you know some women made their own lives, didn't ask for permission?" She doesn't answer. But a week later, you find a dried sprig of lavender left on your doorstep. Her answer, quiet and fragrant. Your world doesn't change overnight. The church still preaches. The men still judge. The bathhouse still echoes with fear and laughter. But you change. You carry those women with you. And with them, something stronger than shame. You remember the priest who asked if your body was yours. Now you know the answer. It always was. You're older now. Not old, but not the girl who once wept into her hands after a dream. Your hands are calloused, your eyes steadier, and your voice doesn't tremble when you speak, even if your heart still races sometimes when it shouldn't. You've lived through whispers, silences, and long seasons of fear. You've walked barefoot in penance, tasted bitterness in both tea and truth, and you've stood quietly beside women in birth and in burning. But now you understand something you didn't before. Desire didn't destroy you. It didn't twist your soul or melt your virtue like butter left in the sun. It revealed you, peeled away the lies that were wrapped around your body from the moment you could walk. And beneath those layers, you were never shameful. Just honest. It's harvest season. You move through golden fields with baskets in your arms and sweat on your brow. The same fields where you once thought your thoughts might get you damned. Now, you walk through them like they belong to you. Because they do. The world hasn't changed its mind about women like you. It still prefers saints who weep and wives who whisper and girls who never ask. But you've learned to live anyway. There's a new midwife in the village now, barely 20. You help her sometimes. Show her which herbs sting and which soothe. You watch her learn to look people in the eye when she says something that matters. She reminds you of yourself. Except she's braver maybe. Or maybe she just has you behind her now. The loose woman from town. She's older too. Still dresses boldly. Still walks like she owes no one an apology. You speak sometimes, only a few words, but enough. She once handed you a piece of cloth embroidered with a flame. You keep it under your pillow. A younger girl asked you once if it was true, if women who wanted things, really wanted them, were punished by the sky, or cursed to die in childbirth, or to be hunted by witches or wolves or men with crosses. You looked her in the eye and said, "No, wanting isn't a curse, silence is." And that was the truth. There's a story you tell now, not to everyone, but to those who need it. About a girl who walked the edge of fire and didn't fall. She dreamed, yes, she desired, and she survived, not because she was perfect, not because she was lucky, but because she refused to disappear. Historians still argue whether women in the Middle Ages had agency, whether they resisted, whether they knew. You could settle that debate with a smile. Of course they knew. Of course they resisted. Maybe not with swords or speeches, but with small things, secret things, a hidden pouch of herbs, a glance that lingers, a refusal to kneel. Desire never dies. It hides. It waits. It passes like smoke through the generations. And sometimes, just sometimes, it finds a crack in the wall and blooms. You lie in bed now, older, bones aching, but breath steady. You still dream. But now, the dreams don't end in punishment. They end in hands held, in bare feet on moss, in laughter that no one silences. And if someone were to ask you now, what happened to women who enjoyed sex in the Middle Ages, you'd say, they endured, they hid, they were punished, but some of them lived, and in quiet corners, by firelight and under moon shadow, they remembered. The room grows still now. The fires burned low, and the shadows have softened into familiar shapes. Outside, the wind has settled into a quiet hum, like the earth itself is sighing. Your breath slows. Your hands rest gently across your chest, and you feel the beat beneath your fingers, steady, slow, certain. Tonight, you've walked through history not with a sword, but with a lantern. You've followed the footprints of women who dared to want, to feel, to know themselves, even when the world told them not to. You've sat with them in bathhouses, knelt beside them in silence, held their trembling hands as they were forced to call their joy a sin. And yet, somehow, they found ways to hold on, to smile, to survive, to pass it down. That soft hunger in your belly, that gentle hum in your ribs, it's not wrong, it's not evil. It's just your humanity, curled and warm like a cat in the sun. So let yourself rest now. Let the history fade into dusk. Let the stories wrap around you like wool. You are safe. You are not alone. You are part of a lineage far older than shame and far stronger than silence. Close your eyes. Let the river carry you. Sleep, dream, breathe. The world will still be turning when you wake.